Hello. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for coming out to the second town hall of 2019 on a beautiful Thursday night in Regina. My name's Kate. I'm your opening act tonight. I have no good jokes, but I do have some important information about how the town hall is going to work, and I'm pretty sure you all want to know. So my first question to you is, who has a question for the Prime Minister tonight? Okay, all right. Be here till midnight. Okay, so this is great. So here's how it's going to work. The Prime Minister is going to stand exactly where I am, in the middle of the room, and he's going to take a look out, and he's going to work his way around the room, picking people who are waving their hands like this. If you have a question, hand up high, and if he picks you, a mic runner. Can I get a mic runner to wave their hand? Perfect. Awesome. One of these lovely individuals is going to pass you a mic, exactly like this, and you're going to talk into it. You're not going to talk with your hands, because you can't hear me. You're going to talk kind of like this, like I'm doing right now. Just rest it on the butt of your chin. Not like this, not like this, not like this. Kind of like this, the sweet spot. If anyone needs translation, French or English, and has not picked up a headset yet, they're just over there past the bleachers. If anyone requires ASL interpretation, just over here. Otherwise, we're very excited to have you all here. Washrooms are just outside the doors. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to absolutely no one because you still have a couple minutes to go. Get your questions ready and we'll start soon.
everyone, to the University of Regina. I want to especially welcome my students. Let me hear from you, the students that are here. My name is Vianne Timmins, and I'm the president of the University of Regina. I want to acknowledge first that the University of Regina is situated on Treaty 4 territory with a presence in Treaty 6. These are the traditional lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, and Dakota peoples, and the homeland of the Métis, an important part of our past, but most importantly, a part of our students' future. I also would like to acknowledge Life Speaker and Elder Noel Starblanket, who is here with us today. Noel, right here. Noel is a great friend of the University of Regina. So it's great to see so many people here from the community. Wonderful to see you. Welcome to your university. The University of Regina sees itself as playing a critical role of a convener, a place where all points of views are heard and expressed respectfully. Tonight, we're very fortunate to have Prime Minister Justin Trudeau here for a town hall. It's an opportunity to hear from the Prime Minister on the important issues facing our nations, and as mentioned, an opportunity for you to ask some questions. We've had several federal politicians on our campus before, including federal opposition leader Andrew Scheer and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair, and every one of those sessions went very well, because our audience was always respectful. Now, not everyone's going to agree on issues, but what matters most here is that we have an opportunity to exchange points of view. I'd like to now call upon Ralph Goodale, the MP for Regina Wascana and the Minister for Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness. Minister Goodale is a proud alumnus of our university. And throughout his 25 years as our MP, the minister has been a strong and loyal supporter of this community and this university. Please welcome Ralph Goodale, who will introduce the Prime Minister.
Vianne, thank you very much. And thank you to the University of Regina and all of your guests this evening for hosting this event. Logistically, this is complicated, and the University of Regina has done a wonderful job of making the arrangements and being our host tonight. So thank you very much. And let me join with you in acknowledging Elder Starblanket and acknowledging at the same time that we are on the territory of Treaty Number 4 and the homeland of the Métis, and we are all very honored to be in this location. Thank you all. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight as well. You've certainly filled the room, and I'm very grateful for your participation from the university and from the broader Saskatchewan community. And I also want to thank Prime Minister Trudeau for making this opportunity available, for providing these unfiltered occasions when Canadians can encounter the Prime Minister and he can encounter them, and the questions can be asked with full vigor and enthusiasm, and the answers can be given with full vigor and enthusiasm. It's going to be a very interesting evening this evening. And I also want to thank the Prime Minister for the policy that he has of investing in Saskatchewan's future. Whether, Vianne, it's that $30 million for the College Avenue campus, which was so important to the University of Regina, or the $40 million to Saskatchewan for better child care, or the $154 million for that brand new agricultural supercluster that will be based in Saskatchewan and in part here at the University of Regina, the $350 million for better health care and home care, $500 million for labor markets, and $900 million over the next decade in better public infrastructure in Saskatchewan, and significantly for every family in Saskatchewan, $1 billion every year through the Canada Child Benefit to help with the costs of raising children and making family life a little bit more affordable. All of this and more is driving more jobs and growth and fairness for Saskatchewan. Tonight is your opportunity to ask the questions about where to from here. How do we continue the momentum? How do we continue the building and the growth? And the person who is here tonight to answer those questions from the perspective of the Government of Canada, it's my great pleasure to introduce to all of you the Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau.
Thank you, Ralph, for your kind words of welcome. Thank you all for being here tonight. This is the second night of my annual town hall tour, which is an opportunity for me to get out across the country and hear directly from Canadians. One of the most important and difficult things about my job is that it's very easy to get wrapped up in Ottawa, surrounded by all sorts of experts, all sorts of very smart people and great representatives from across the country, and feel like you're getting a sense of the whole country. But it only really happens when you get out there, when you have opportunities to talk with people, to listen to them, to hear their concerns, to respond to their concerns, to understand the issues facing Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And that's why every year I look forward to these opportunities to come out and hear directly from all of you on the issues that are in your mind, to share my perspective on them, what we're doing, why we're doing some of the things we're doing, to leave you better informed as citizens, and obviously this year as the choices you're ultimately going to make in the next federal election. But this is not just an exercise for me in getting to know what's going on across the country. It's also an exercise for all of us as citizens, all of you, to hear different perspectives and different voices from your fellow citizens who have issues that are maybe not top of mind for you that is worthwhile hearing about. There will be a range of questions, of issues, of concerns brought up, and all of us being part of this exercise in democracy, I think, is something that is really, really good for our country and for democracy. Having unfiltered exchanges of ideas, I think, is really, really important in order to recognize that there are always a great range of points of view, particularly in a country as diverse as Canada is, but that we all have to figure out how to work together and build a better future that we all want for our kids, our grandkids, our neighbors, and their kids. This is the challenge we have as a country. It is a challenge I have as I serve as your Prime Minister, but it's something that we all, particularly in the 21st century, have an opportunity and a responsibility to weigh in thoughtful ways. So I'm going to go around the room and take questions from people randomly. All I ask is that in your question and in your comments, you be respectful of everyone else in the room. I obviously have opportunities to speak to the media all the time, and my voice gets out one way or another, but this is an opportunity for you here to have an exchange with the Prime Minister and to make yourselves heard directly. And I would ask that each of you be respectful of the entire room. A lot of you are here with questions. Many of you are here without questions, just wanting to be part of it. And I want to try and make sure that this is as positive an experience for everyone, and that's what we're going to focus on. So without further ado, I'm going to start. I'm going to loop around the room in a clockwise direction, starting from this section here. Who has the first question for me today? Okay, we'll move right up to the next section in the back, and we'll start with you, ma'am, with the scarf in the turquoise shirt. Yes.
Me?
Yes. Sorry, there's a mic for you right there.
First of all, I would like to say thank you for your service in a very complex and turbulent time in our history, and thank you for stepping up. It's a very complex world, and I'm thankful for that. I have been in mental health advocacy since the age of 13, when my brother became ill. I've had my own lived experience with psychosis, hospitalization, and commitment. And I was wondering when the federal government would be able to release some funding to people with lived experience so we can create the services that we want and not be superimposed by narratives of the industry.
Listen, thank you for your question. Thank you for your candor and your courage. I mean, as so many of us know, because just about everyone in this room and indeed across the country has a loved one or a friend or a family member who has struggled with mental illness. But we know that there are still significant stigmas around it that we have to work to counter, and we have to do a much better job of supporting and empowering people to be able to fulfill themselves, to be able to find their path, to be able to deal with the challenges that they have. And there's still a lot more work to do. In our renegotiation of the health accords as a federal government, we put forward about $6 billion of new money that had never been done before, specifically for mental health in the provinces. And within that, it was a good thing. But within that, obviously, that's not enough money, as I'm sure you'll know. There is a lot of work to do. The federal government doesn't have direct jurisdiction over the provincial healthcare systems, obviously, but there are things that we can do and work with the provinces on improving. One of the things we actually realized was working specifically around mental health and young people is a really, really effective way of making a huge difference, because we know that most people have their first episodes or symptoms or appearances of mental health challenges when they are under 25, and being able to give young people the tools to get the support they need and start getting the kind of support they need early on will bode well for a more productive, happier, better life. So that's one of the emphases we have. I don't know much, I will be honest, about individual paths on that, but it's certainly something I will take back and talk with our health minister about to see how we can do, as we do a better job and begin to do a better job of dealing with mental health issues, how we can create the kind of individualized support that obviously you're talking about here. But I thank you very much for bringing forward that question and the issue. Thank you very much. One thing I forgot to mention, I should have mentioned in the very beginning, we do have simultaneous interpretation. So if someone wants to ask a question in French, I will answer it in French. And we also have an American Sign Language interpreter somewhere there, so that there is as much accessibility as possible for this town hall. So I'll go for another question here. I'm going to work my way around the room, and I'll go to you in the second row in black. Yes. Okay. The mic's coming over to you. Just stand up, please. Yeah.
Hello. Hi. This is an honor to ask a question. Okay, I want to know what is done about getting more physicians in Canada, and also, you know, it's a long process for foreign medical graduates to get a residency position. What can be done to increase the number of positions?
Well, that's another great question. Canada is very proud of our healthcare system, but there's always things we need to do to improve it. And getting a lot of great physicians, making sure there's enough doctors to serve our entire country, particularly in some of the more rural or remote areas, is an ongoing challenge. That's why international students and international physicians can be an excellent addition to our medical system. We do, and I understand the concern that there are sometimes a lot of relearning or a lot of hoops to go through. And we can do certain things about streamlining and improving the capacity to recognize experiences and credentials achieved elsewhere. But we also have to make sure that any doctor in Canada, regardless of where they trained, regardless of where they are from, regardless of what they look like, has the same excellent level of excellence. You can't have people worried that if they go to someone who trained in a different country, that they might not be able to give you the same high quality medical care that we've come to expect and need in Canada. So that approach is always requiring a certain amount of balance. We are looking for ways to improve and to accelerate the process, but at the same time, we do have to protect the integrity and the quality of the Canadian medical system. Thank you for your question. You, sir, in the camouflage shirt with the green hat. Yes.
Hi, my name's Lloyd Pletz from Fort Capel. I got two short questions for you. The first one is, what year are you going to remove your dad's microphones and cameras out of our electronics that are all throughout our homes, our offices, and our bedrooms? And the second question is, what year are you going to shut down the corrupt organization called CSIS, who is using these microphones and cameras to stalk, harass, bully, terrorize, drug and poison, and kill Canadians?
Thank you. Thank you, Lloyd, for your question. Give me a second here. I believe it was my father who pointed out that the state has no place in the bedrooms of the nation, which means I am fairly certain that there are no microphones in the homes of all Canadians or cameras. Secondly, CSIS is the Canadian Security Intelligence Administration. Sorry. Thank you. Okay. Yes, sir. I have seen the same reports as you on the problems with Amazon's Alexa and the passive understanding of conversations. And there are issues around privacy that we do have to take very seriously as technologies get both easier to use and smarter and open up vulnerabilities for protecting Canadians' privacy. And that is something that we very much take seriously. But I can also assure you that your very own Ralph Goodale, extraordinary minister for Saskatchewan and for public safety and security, who has responsibility over CSIS, would reassure you to say that CSIS actually does not have a mandate to spy on Canadians. It's illegal to do that by CSIS, and that is something that we make sure is properly enforced all the time. So Canadians can rest assured that their government is not spying on them. Thank you, sir, for your questions. A question from the middle. You in the blue shirt, sir. Yes, the light blue shirt. Yes, stand up.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, this is Hele Liu, and I'm an international student, and I just finished my PhD program. Right now, I'm looking for a job, and I realized, and for international students, and we didn't have enough opportunity to get a job. So what can be done to create more opportunities and for international students to serve Canada? Thank you.
Thank you. International students are an extraordinary benefit both here in Canada and around the world. When Canadians choose to study abroad, or when folks from abroad come to choose to study in Canada, we are adding to the understanding of the world, we're adding to the experiences people live through. We are benefiting both our home country, if we return to it with gained knowledge, or the new country to which we bring experiences and a perspective that is valuably adding to our diversity. One of the things that we have done in Canada is recognize that creating opportunities for international students to stay in Canada, to build a career in Canada, is a net positive. When we look at the desire that Canadians have, that our businesses have, that our communities have, to draw in great talent from around the world and have them build their lives, build their futures, and contribute to the Canadian economy through immigration, international students already demonstrate significant advantages because they've lived in Canada, they've gotten used to our winters, they've gotten used to the way of life that we have here, and they have been successful through our Canadian post-secondary education system, which gives them an advantage in terms of finding jobs. There's still lots more work to do to make sure that we are creating all the possible opportunities for you to be able to either find a good job here or continue to build a family. But this is something we continue to value very much. So thank you for choosing to study in Canada and being part of this here. You, sir, in the green shirt. Yes, in the second row.
Hello. I want to thank everyone for providing this opportunity. I just have a question, like policy question. So many people might know about Khashoggi. So after he killed very bad at the Saudi Arabia embassy, so why Canada doesn't stop the deal, which is a weapon deal, with the Saudi Arabia? I know that US and the Canada, we are like brothers, and somehow it's not possible to become independent from a good friend, US, maybe Trump, I hope not. But why you at least don't try to become independent, not be a partner of a crime, like selling weapons?
No, thank you. Thank you for your question. First of all, Canada has been very, very clear on issues around Saudi Arabia, that we have real concerns around human rights. We actually got significantly sanctioned. They pulled their embassy, their ambassador. The Saudis were going after or inciting or removing Saudi students from international students from schools across the country. There was a significant diplomatic conflict with Saudi Arabia just last summer because we spoke up so loudly and clearly on the unjust arrest of women's rights activists in Saudi Arabia. Further to that, the killing of Jamal Khashoggi is something that I brought up directly with the Crown Prince as something that Canada has very serious concerns about. There is nothing more concerning than the murder of a journalist who's busy doing their job because they are embarrassing or challenging to a particular regime. That is one of the foundations of any free society, and the world rightly needs to stand up clearly to highlight that. But the greatest humanitarian disaster or crisis going on in the world right now is actually the war in Yemen. And we have been pushing very hard on Saudi Arabia and others to bring a ceasefire to Yemen. We are in a moment of ceasefire right now, and Canada is working with the United Nations to try and keep pressure on succeeding with this ceasefire and getting the humanitarian help to the tens of millions of people who are starving in Yemen right now. So there are a lot of things that we have very real concerns about Saudi Arabia on, and Canada has been one of the more vocal countries in engaging with this. So I totally understand your question on why then are we continuing with a contract to sell light armored vehicles to Saudi Arabia. Now, this comes to a challenge of the rule of law. Canada, under the previous government, signed a contract to sell these light armored vehicles to Saudi Arabia. And when the government changes, Canada, as a country of the rule of law, needs to respect its contracts. As I've said, we are looking into the export permits, and we are looking for ways to demonstrate that this is not entirely in keeping with what Canadians want, particularly given recent impacts. But it also is a question of the folks who, because of this contract, have jobs in London, Ontario, good engineering jobs that they felt were secured, that were building their families on, and now are possibly in a more challenging position. So we are working carefully with what is a very complex issue with no clear answers, but I can tell you we will continue to stand up very clearly and unequivocally for human rights around the world in regular ways. The contract is a difficult one that I can't even talk about much more than I already have, because part of the deals of the contract the previous government signed is you can't talk about what's in the details of the contract that was signed. So there's a lot of work to do to try and figure this out, and we are doing that work. Thank you very much. Question from down here. You, sir, in the black t-shirt. Yes. Just come on right forward.
I've been around this area here for my life, and so has my family, generations worth. And I'm watching what's going on the world stage. I'm looking at the fact that Germany, France, and a bunch of other European countries that stood up on the same side of the fence when tyranny was coming down on us. We've got an open border allowing this stuff to come in freely. And what are we doing about that thing in particular, an open border? What are we doing about it? Okay. You're talking about my freedom and everybody's lives who gave here, everybody who put their life down on the line, and you're saying, it's okay, it won't happen to us. It's happening in France and it's happening all over.
Sorry, sir, what's happening?
The people are saying no, because these two cultures will not mix.
Which two cultures are those, sir?
Islam and Christianity.
No, sorry, okay, hang on. let's be, sorry? Democracy only works in a country like Canada if people are free to express their fears, their concerns, their opinions, and we get an opportunity to respond to them. So I'm going to ask you all to be respectful of the Speaker's question, and thank you for sharing your concerns, sir.
I've got one other thing I want to say about it.
Okay.
Is that they've openly stated that they want to kill us.
Okay.
And you're letting them in.
Okay. Sir, how am I going to go on this one? Canada is a country that was built by immigration. Waves of people came to this country, were welcomed by the folks who had lived here for millennia, the First Nations and the folks here on Treaty 4 land, and built this society with waves of people fleeing religious persecution, fleeing tyranny, fleeing to try and build a better life for themselves here than they had back home. And whether it's folks fleeing from world wars or fleeing from civil wars, these people always want the same thing: to be able to live in peace, to raise their families, and to create a better future for themselves and their communities. And that is what generations upon generations of folks have done here in Canada. And that is what has created this extraordinary diverse society we have. Now, Canada remains one of the only countries in the world where citizens are, by and large, positively inclined towards immigration. And one of the reasons we are that way is because Canadians have confidence in our immigration system. We have a system that over the past decades has done a very good job of not just having people come to Canada, but setting them up for success, helping with integration, helping them thrive in our communities, helping them contribute to growing this country. And we are a country that you can look around any room and see the diversity that has made us strong. And any given generation, I remember talking to Italian immigrants in Montreal, descendants of Italian immigrants in Montreal, who would tell stories of the terrible discrimination that first wave faced when they came over in the post-war years. It's not easy to pick up everything you have, cross an ocean, and try and build a future for yourselves. And if people are doing it, it's because they believe they can build a better future for their kids and grandkids than they could have in a place where they knew things. Now, the question came up a lot in the last election around Syrian refugees. You will remember that we made a commitment in the 2015 election that Canada would accept 40,000 Syrian refugees in the first months of 2016. And we did that. And the way we did that was because Canadians right across the country, church groups, community groups, families got together and pulled their resources and welcomed in Syrian families, because these people were fleeing for their lives from civil war, from conflict, from bombs, from a terrible future for their kids. And they are so grateful for the opportunity they have to contribute to a country where they don't have to fear for their kids' lives every single day, that they inevitably end up contributing in ways that we couldn't even imagine to growing our society. It doesn't mean it happens right away. There are difficulties in the first years on integration. There's always going to be challenges. But we know that this has been the story of Canada. People coming to try and build a better future. And there are always reasons to be concerned and reasons to be worried about someone different arriving in your neighborhood. But what Canadians have always known is that it's better for all of us if we're good neighbors. It's better for all of us if you're looking out for your neighbor, if you're understanding that we all build this success together. Now, our immigration system does a very good job of doing security checks and screenings when people come in, whether they arrive regularly through an airport or whether they cross the border from the United States in an irregular way, as is happening more often these days than ever before. But we have an immigration system that is working. It's not an open border policy. We're not an open country. We're a country that continues to apply every single rule of law we have on the people who arrive here. And we're a country that continues to abide by our international obligations to be a country that provides refuge to people who are fleeing persecution and war. That is one of the things that has made Canada great, and that is one of the things that is going to be an incredible advantage for us in the world. We have a population that is aging. We need people to arrive with their talents, with their hopes, with their dreams, with their capacities to work hard, to build our communities, to build our future. We need to get it done right, but we are welcoming in people who are being turned away from other countries for the wrong reasons, and it is an incredible benefit to Canada. You can see all sorts of stories of people who say, wow, I'm not feeling the usual immigration accepting countries of Canada, the United States, Australia, the UK. Canada is the country that is benefiting from being able to draw in the best and the brightest because we are still understanding that immigration is an economic benefit to Canadians. It makes our communities more resilient. It makes our country stronger, and it will continue to. Question from you, sir, in the gray, yes, with the gray hair and the gray shirt. Here you go.
All right, well, thank you for being here, Prime Minister. As all Prime Ministers and governments know, that there is a lot of criticism for things you don't get done, but I also want to thank you for the things you do get done and the success you've had. And I want to say, again, thank you to Minister Goodale, again, for the things he's done for this community and the investment he's brought here and for keeping us safe in this country. So that's appreciated. You know, regardless of party stripes, all Canadians should want our Prime Minister and government to be successful in raising the quality of lives in our own country. My question is, the housing market has been hammered by new mortgage rules and stress tests designed to slow down the housing market in Vancouver and Toronto. Historically, home ownership has been one of Canada's most effective ways to share wealth amongst the middle class. At best, home ownership creates equity growth. At worst, it creates forced savings for Canadians. All indicators are pointing to the new mortgage rules and stress tests are locking out newcomers, young people, and many in the middle class into rental accommodations. Rental concentrates wealth creation to very few, mostly landlords. Home ownership creates equity for many. How can the federal government reverse the declines in home ownership rates that are happening because of the new mortgage rules and stress tests?
Thank you very much for your question. Housing affordability is one of those issues that you hear from right across the country, not just in Vancouver or Toronto where there's particular challenges going on, but everywhere. People are worried about the affordability of their housing, worried about housing affordability as well, and that is something that we've recognized. So over the past year, Canada has re-engaged in investing in housing. We put together a $40 billion national housing strategy that has a number of components, including a greater availability of middle-income rental units, because that is something that we need, and a way of focusing on reducing chronic homelessness by 50% in the coming years, because that's a real concern. But there's also a number of things we need to do about making housing more affordable for millennials trying to start a new family, whether it's folks who are trying to get into the housing market for the first time, or people realizing that they can't afford to sell their home even if it's really expensive because there's no way they could buy another one. There are all sorts of challenges people are facing. But the flip side of it also is, as we saw from some of the challenges in the United States around the last recession, people can overextend in buying their housing. So we made some modest changes to mortgage rules that are making sure that people are not getting more vulnerable than they have to by not being able to afford the houses that they're looking for. Now there are folks and there are communities and indeed the real estate industry has concerns about the fact that maybe we're making it too hard to buy a new house, and that's something that we are very alert to and something we are working with. We're looking and collecting data, but I think we can all agree that we need to make sure that Canadians don't end up saddled in mountains of debt if there is a recession or there is a housing collapse. We need to make sure we're ensuring that people can afford their homes and afford homes for their families and for their parents if they need to get particular helps. These are the things that we are focused on. I appreciate very much you bringing up the issue, and we're always going to try and make sure that balance is found where people can afford their homes, and we're creating enough homes for them to be able to actually be able to save through the equity you get by buying your own home. So thank you for your question, sir. Question down here. You in the red t-shirt.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
I have a two-part question here for you. Why are you taking $1.8 billion over the next 4 years from Veterans Affairs? And on the second portion of that question, what are you doing to take away the backlog in Veterans Affairs? 3 months ago, the backlog was standing at June 2017, and today it's at July 2017, and all things are pointing towards the fact that it's actually taking longer and not shorter. The wait lists are getting longer. There are people in this riding, Souris Moose Mountain, that are over a year waiting on claims from Veterans Affairs. What are you doing to get stuff moving at Veterans Affairs, because nothing is happening?
Well, thank you for your question, and thank you for your service. How we recognize the people who have stepped up to serve their country, how we support them, how we value them is one of those foundational things for Canada. We are a country that needs to do a much better job of supporting those who've chosen to serve and ensure that they and their families get the supports they need. That's why over the past 3 years we invested more than $10 billion new dollars in Veterans Affairs. We reopened the 9 Veterans Affairs offices that had been closed down by the previous government, and we've strengthened the various supports we've given, which isn't just monetary supports, but is also supports in terms of supports for families, supports for retraining, supports for getting back into the workforce, for our most affected veterans who live, who are disabled or who are dealing with PTSD. We have increased the amounts of supports we're giving to them, but there is still a lot more to do. I recognize that the backlog is still there. We are increasing our investments to be able to respond to veterans. We've moved forward with the pension for life as we had promised to, as the promise had been made to veterans. It's not done yet. It's not perfect yet. But it is something that we have been seriously committed to and something that we are delivering for those who stepped up to serve Canada and their families. And I thank you deeply for your question and for your service, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Sorry, yes. That is not money that came out of Veterans Affairs. That is money that was projected to be spent, wasn't able to be spent, and is going to be continued to be invested in over the coming years. Thank you. Another question. You in the back in the red, sir. The second last row. Yes. We'll make our runners run. Sorry.
That's okay.
Good evening, Prime Minister. I want to say thank you to Canada for opening its home on behalf of myself and other international students. Thousands of us out there, we say thank you. It's an opportunity to come here and learn, and we are grateful for it. Education is a fundamental right, and every child is entitled to it. But the question to be asked is this: what's the point when education is a right, but it's not affordable? The reason why I said so is because, hello? Now, the reason why I said so is because the cost of tuition for for students, most especially international students, keep going high. We're here to study. Most of us are sponsored by our parents. But back in our countries too are going through some economic turmoil, which is making it difficult, more difficult for some of our parents to sponsor our education. And the way that most of us try to balance that up is to go get out there and work. And we're limited to what capacity of hours we can work. And this is bringing pressure on us and also on our parents back in our countries. Now my question is this: Prime Minister, we want to come and study, but what can we do when it's becoming unaffordable for us? What is the federal government going to do to make sure that education is affordable for students, most especially for international students? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Education is absolutely essential. We know that here in Canada and around the world, and that is one of the reasons why, as G7 president last year, Canada had the presidency of the G7. One of the initiatives we invested in was $3.8 billion going towards education for women and girls in conflict-affected states and crisis-affected states. That was identified as a significant gap where we needed to make a big difference and really bring the world to a better place and create opportunities for millions upon millions of girls to go to school in situations where they couldn't, because we know that's one of the most powerful ways of moving forward. So we absolutely agree that investments in education are essential if we're going to solve the challenges of the world and build a better world for all. On the question of tuition fees, well, the fact is education, post-secondary education, is expensive. It is to get a high-quality education in a great university like University of Saskatchewan and others. It takes an awful lot of investments in buildings and teachers and in University of Regina, sorry. I'm going to get that from Ralph later. And it takes significant investments to do that. Now, the government of Canada and the provincial government put a lot of taxpayer money into supporting our post-secondary educations. That's taxpayer money paid by ourselves, by previous generations, by the parents of Canadian students in Canadian schools. International students haven't contributed to Canada's tax base to the same degree. So when we look at making education affordable, we unfortunately, for international students, do have to look at making sure education is affordable for Canadians as a priority. That's why the fees for education for Canadians are always significantly lower. As a government, we've increased the amount of bursaries for low and middle income students by 50% across the country. We've made sure that you don't have to start repaying your student loans until you're making at least $25,000 a year. These are things designed to make sure that Canadians are able to get through their education system. International students come from other countries to study in Canada and benefit from our extraordinary institutions. They are always going to have to pay a little bit more, and it's a way of supporting the institutions we have. I understand there are ways we could probably make things a little bit easier by looking at capacity to work more hours and paths to integrate into Canada, but for the time being, unfortunately, it will always be more expensive for international students to attend universities in Canada than it will for Canadians. That's just the way it is. Thank you, sir. Question, you in the pink. Yes, standing right.
What was your favorite toy when you were a little kid?
That's actually a great question, because just this Christmas I got to give to my 5-year-old son a version of my favorite toy as a kid, which was Stretch Armstrong. Anyone remember Stretch Armstrong? He was this wrestler figure about a foot high that you could, he was made of some sort of like silly putty stuff that you could stretch out and wrap his arms around each other and tie him in a knot, and then he'd slowly ooze back into shape. But I left him on a radiator one day and he popped and all sorts of molasses sort of poured out. And this was in the 70s, so who knows how toxic it was. But a friend of mine in Toronto actually found me, because I'd mentioned that I was a big fan of Stretch Armstrong, an original Stretch Armstrong that he gave to me for Christmas, which I then regifted to my son Hadrian. And my wife Sophie just looked at this, goes, "What in the world is that? What kind of toy is this?" But it was Stretch Armstrong, and it was very, very cool. But thank you for your question. You in the middle in the brown shirt. Yes. Nope. Halfway up on the left-hand side. Yes. Yes. Just forward. Yeah. Oh. Sorry, I was hesitating to point out that you were bald, and I thought you might be insulted, but I realized that, yeah. You probably know. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the question. I just would like to, you commented on some of the initiatives that you committed to in the leading up to the last election, and some of the things that you were able to deliver on in terms of certain spending initiatives. Could you comment, I believe that you quoted about balancing a budget at some point in time by 2019, and you had certain quotes that were made, you know, reflecting that it will balance, and I don't remember the exact words. And now we're in a spot where it is going to be balanced, I think, when there's some people still alive that are in this room. And I would like to know your comment on that, because a lot of the items that you spoke to have been related to spending, which did get some excitement, but I'm curious on some of the other initiatives, or if you could comment on that, with the exception of not commenting in regards to changing the metric for measuring the performance of the economy relative to the budget and the balancing of it. Thank you very much.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for your question. Obviously, it's a question that's fundamental about fiscal responsibility. People want to know that government is actually investing in the kinds of things that are going to make it easier to succeed and grow the economy in meaningful ways in the coming years. And one of the metrics that people look at is, are you in balance? Are you taking in as much money as you are spending out and investing? In Canada, on an economy that's close to $2 trillion, on a federal budget that's around $300 billion, we have a deficit of about $20 billion. Now, one of the things that was, as you mentioned in the last election campaign, a differentiation point between the Liberal Party of Canada and Mr. Harper and the Conservative Party of Canada was on our approach to fiscal discipline. The Conservatives worked hard to balance the budget at all costs just in time for the election, because they felt that that was a really important message to Canadians. They rushed the Phoenix pay system. They shuttered veteran services offices to save $9 million. They made cuts to a number of programs, including the Canadian Border Services Agency, which is a little bit ironic given their critiques around immigration. They made a decision that it was most important to create a balance at the last minute just in time for the election. We made a different choice. We realized that what Canada needed was investment. That people were worried about being able to afford the cost of living, be able to provide a good future for their kids. So we said, what we're going to do instead is invest in the middle class. We're going to do that right off the bat by lowering taxes for the middle class and raising them on the wealthiest 1%, which was the first thing we did. Then we're going to move forward with a Canada Child Benefit. It gives more money to 9 out of 10 Canadian families, because we're sending more money to the middle class and folks working hard to join it, and we're not sending child benefit checks to the wealthiest Canadians, because they don't need them. And that has made, as Ralph mentioned, that's $1 billion a year flowing into the pockets of the middle class in Saskatchewan and making a huge difference in people's lives. We've also made historic investments in infrastructure that is making a positive difference, whether it's housing, whether it's things like flood mitigation infrastructure, whether it's things like roads and ports that are helping us trade with the world. We're also focusing on closing the gaps with Indigenous peoples, making sure that we are looking at them as true partners and stewards of the land, and making sure that an Indigenous student going to school gets the same amount of money invested in them as a non-Indigenous student going through a provincial school. These are things that are investments in our future. So yes, there are things that, as you point out, cost money. So how do we know that we're not just spending in an irresponsible way? Because people want to know that we are being thoughtful about making sure that we're not spending beyond our means or investing beyond our means. That's why we look at something that we talked about in the election campaign. It's not a new metric. It's the idea that our debt as a country, as a share of the economy of our country, should be low and getting lower every single year. And that's exactly what we have. We actually have the lowest debt to GDP ratio of most of our allies in the G7 and the OECD. And every year, even with the investments we're making in veterans, in seniors, in families, in Indigenous people, in infrastructure, our debt to GDP ratio continues to decrease. So Liberals believe deeply in fiscal responsibility. We were the ones that balanced the budget once again in the 90s. But what we saw under the previous government was $150 billion added to our national debt, more than any other government had ever done in our history, and stubbornly low growth to show for it. What we've been able to do over these past years, these past 3 years, is create 800,000 new jobs across the country, have the lowest unemployment rate in Canadian history just a few months ago. And here in Saskatchewan, we've created over 10,000 new jobs, people in Saskatchewan have created over 10,000 new jobs over the past year because we are focused on creating the conditions for that kind of success. So there were two very different visions of the economy on display in the last election. Stephen Harper and the Conservatives, who thought you could cut your way to balance, and had tried that for many years with a little version of trickle-down in there of giving tax benefits and advantages to the wealthiest in the hopes that that would stimulate economic growth. We had the lowest growth rate since the depths of the Great Depression under Stephen Harper. And over the past 3 years, we have created growth, we have created jobs, we're investing in our universities, in our science, in training, in Indigenous peoples and closing the gaps, in infrastructure. We are creating economic growth that is making a real difference, not just for a few Canadians, but in the lives of all Canadians. And that is our approach to fiscal discipline and growing the economy. Thank you very much, sir, for your question. Another question. I haven't asked a question in a while. Let's go in here. You, sir, with the I Love Pipelines t-shirt. There you go. Thank you, sir.
First of all, I want to congratulate you. You made it 45 minutes into your speech without blaming Harper. That was pretty good. I'd really like to start talking here about some of the pipe and steel tariffs that are going on, and also about the Trans Mountain Pipeline. You've made your way out here to Evraz twice in the last year. You seem quite proud about it. The second time you showed up in July 1st, you made some statements that you wanted to come out here and fight for Canadians and stand up for Canadians, because on July 1st you put the counter tariffs on the U.S. Manufactured goods, which was great. But for the life of me, what I can't figure out is, why would you sign on to the U.S. MCA while the pipe and tariffs were still active? Why didn't you walk away? When in that part of the negotiations did you decide that we here in Regina just weren't good enough? You're going to move on with this agreement without us and leave us behind. And then to add insult on top of it, we have this Trans Mountain pipeline that was going to be funded 100% by private investors without a single cent of public money. Not even once when you were campaigning did you ever throw out the idea that, you talked here about investing in Canada. Well, never in your platform did you say you were going to go out and buy a $4.5 billion company. Like, this whole pipeline was going to get put in the ground without you spending a cent of all of our money. But here we are. You got yourself in a hell of a predicament. You pissed off the Greens. You pissed off your base. You pissed off us that don't like you. And the pipeline still isn't in the ground. I just can't figure out how you're going to get to yes on this one. It's going to get hung up in the courts. People are going to challenge you because now you own the pipeline and now you get to say how it's going to go in. We have a National Energy Board that was put in place that put all these onuses on these companies to, meet the standards of what the people wanted. And we still can't get there. You can legalize marijuana, but we can't twin a pipeline, an existing pipeline, to the coast. You talk about, the fellow up here, he wants to talk about balanced budgets and how you're going to deal with, the money coming in and the income. Well, we're just getting hosed on our oil something terribly. Like, get this pipeline in the ground, get it out to the coast, and you're going to have a whole bunch more money that you can spend like a drunken farm wife after harvest in New York City.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. First of all, thank you, sir, for your hard work in the steel industry. I know how important it is, the work that you do, the work that folks do here in Saskatchewan and Alberta and right across the country in our oil industry, in our steel industry, in making sure that we are getting our resources to markets and that we are growing as an economy. So I recognize the challenges that these steel and aluminum tariffs represent to our economy, to your work. And that is why we are taking these steel and aluminum tariffs extraordinarily seriously. It's why we came in with countervailing tariffs, and thank you for your support of those, on American products, which is creating pressure within the American system by governors of Kentucky, amongst others, to put pressure on the president to actually move off of those steel and aluminum tariffs. Your first question was indeed about the signing of the new NAFTA deal. And should we have not gone ahead with NAFTA because of the steel and aluminum tariffs? And that was certainly a question that we had to ask ourselves and that we reflected on, because these tariffs are hurting our workers, hurting our economy. One of the things that we've done is make sure that we are supporting and putting measures in place to support companies like Evraz, but it's not just Regina. It's companies in Sault Ste. Marie for Algoma Steel. It's companies in Hamilton. It's aluminum companies in BC and in Quebec that are all being negatively impacted by these punitive American tariffs. And every single conversation I've had with the president, I bring up the fact that these tariffs are not just hurting Canadian workers like yourself and Canadian companies, they're also hurting American workers and American companies. And we're seeing increasing stories on that. So we were in a position where we had to reflect on, do we sign the new NAFTA with our largest and most important trading partner and pledge to continue to look for moments to pressure the U.S. to remove these steel and aluminum tariffs? Or do we walk away from a $2 billion a day trading relationship that is hugely important for the Canadian economy? Securing NAFTA at a time of unpredictability and protectionism in the United States was a massive priority for all Canadians. And we did it, and we did it together. Premiers of provinces right across the country, including right here in Saskatchewan, stepped up, and all across political perspectives and ideologies, we spoke with a very clear voice about Canada's priorities, about what we needed in the new NAFTA deal, and we got a good deal for Canada. And we secured our most important trading relationship. And that is not a small thing. Yes, I would have liked to have been able to convince the President to pull back the steel and aluminum tariffs before signing, but that was not going to be possible. That was very clear from the US administration. So the choice then became, do we actually secure NAFTA or not? And I know here that steel and aluminum is extraordinarily important, but so are our agricultural exports, so are the billions of dollars worth of trade that every part of the country does with the United States, our most important market every single day. And that is something that we needed to secure. Now, it's not over, obviously, because the US still has to ratify the new NAFTA deal. And we have already been working with members of Congress, with governors, with business interests who are being affected negatively by these tariffs that the President has put in, to put pressure on the President that in the process of ratification, they should remove those steel and aluminum tariffs. But in the meantime, we will continue to support companies like Evraz and its workers, the steel and aluminum workers right across the country, to make sure that these tariffs do not adversely impact you, your livelihood, your families, and the communities that rely on. Secondly, the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Let's be very clear. Kinder Morgan was walking away from the Trans Mountain Pipeline. They were walking away because they felt the political risks were too great. They felt that the context they were in with the government of BC being opposed to the pipeline and the complications they were facing around this, they wanted to throw up their hands and walk away. And for me and for all Canadians, it is an absolute priority to get our oil resources to markets other than the United States. Folks in our oil industry, in Saskatchewan, in Alberta, are suffering right now because of a massive differential in the price for Canadian oil, because we are prisoners. 99% of our oil goes to the United States right now. And, you know, on top of that, the United States is sometimes a challenging partner to deal with. It makes sense to diversify our markets to markets in Asia. So we need to get our landlocked oil resources to markets across the Pacific. The Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion will allow meaningful impacts on that. And that is why we made the decision that the federal government should take over the pipeline expansion project. Now, I am confident, and I think most people who know the oil industry are confident, that that pipeline, that as it is, makes money every single month with the existing pipeline, is going to be very valuable once it is completed. It is not, as you pointed out, was not in my platform that I was going to buy a pipeline for Canadians. But it was in my platform that I was going to grow the economy and protect the environment at the same time, and do it in thoughtful, responsible ways. And moving forward on the twinning of an existing pipeline to a well-serviced marine area in the Port of Vancouver, which also involves us investing massively in oceans protection and moving forward in partnership as much as possible with Indigenous peoples, is, to my mind, the way to get projects built. If you think back into history, 100 years ago, when people laid a railroad across the prairies, Nobody checked with the locals. Nobody checked with the people who've been living and stewards of this land for millennia. They just decided to put it through. Well, that was then. That is not now. Now, when we get big projects built in this country, we have to engage in partnership, in respectful dialogue, in benefit sharing, in respect and partnership with Indigenous peoples. That's the way we're going to get big projects built. We also, for Canadians across the country who are worried about future generations, about protecting our air and water and land, we also know we have to be responsible about the environment and thoughtful about the impacts on future generations. Now, the previous government, you might want to plug your ears, sir, I'm about to mention Harper again. Sorry, I don't mean to be quip about that. The previous government had, as everyone does, a priority of getting our resources to new markets. But they thought the way to do that would be to minimize environmental oversight and marginalize Indigenous voices that disagreed with the pipelines. Thank you. That fact didn't work. For 10 years, the pipelines weren't able to be built. We did not get resources to new markets other than the United States under the Conservative government. We are now on track to doing that. We are now on track to do, sorry, we've got two people shouting at me on exact opposite sides of the question right now. We got exactly the thing. We have folks, okay, I'm going to respond to that question in a second. But we are now in a situation where we are working with Indigenous peoples. We are working with environmental scientists to make sure that the impacts are minimized, and we are going to move forward in the right way. And quite frankly, the Federal Court of Appeals laid out a blueprint whereby we could get the consultations right and move forward in the right way, and that is what we're focused on doing. We are focused on getting our resources to new markets and doing it in the right way. That's exactly what we are going to do because that's what you need, that's what the oil sands need, and that's what the Canadian economy needs in terms of that. So thank you very much for your question. Now I'm going to take a question from the opposite side of the issue. Sorry, ma'am, you asked a question about Saudi Arabian oil. Do you want to ask that? Sorry. No, you can ask that Saudi Arabian question because you shouted it out.
I'm sorry, but I'm just like, it's so hard to be patient here with all of these lies. Okay. Yes, that is one question. Why are we buying oil from Saudi Arabia, Mr. Trudeau? Number two question. I just read a report from Ontario where you said Sharia law was compatible with Canadian values. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Sorry. We're going to let her speak, and then we're
Number three question, Mr. Trudeau, is you've sold us out to globalism.
Okay.
You are not working for Canada. You are working for your globalist partners. I wonder how much they're paying you to betray Canada. Okay. What do we do with traitors in Canada, Mr. Trudeau? We used to hang them for treason. And you're doing that very same thing to us now. Okay. We know what you're doing. But you can start with the oil question first.
Okay. It's interesting that you started with concerns about facts and truth in answers and in our approach. And if we're going to have rigorous debates about what the best way is forward for the country, I think we need to do it around the facts. Now, there is a lot of misinformation out there that talks about, among others, Quebec as being reliant on Saudi oil, and that's a problem for Canada and a big issue. That is false. Quebec actually gets its oil from the United States and from Western Canada. The reversal of the Line 9 pipeline actually means over the past 3 years, Quebec has gotten 3 times as much oil from the oil sands as it ever had before. So the games being played around misinformation for political partisan reasons out there, and I certainly don't blame you, man, because these so-called facts are floating around here, and that's one of the good things about having an opportunity to engage and to ask blunt questions about things that you may have seen or heard on the internet, and I'm happy to tell you that that is simply not true. Quebec gets its oil from the United States and from our oil sands. Secondly, you had a question, your third question was on globalism. Oh no, your second question was on Sharia law. I am pleased to be able to tell you that that also is not something that I ever said. So there is, again, misinformation out there that as citizens, we should be skeptical. I know you could be skeptical. You should be skeptical about what any politician says, including me. You should be looking into what the facts are. You should be a responsible consumer of information. It's your responsibility as a citizen to be thoughtful and engaged and listening to a broad range of perspectives and looking at the facts so you can make a determination about how we can move forward best as a country. And in the upcoming election, I hope that people will question what all different politicians say and try and see who might be telling the truth, who might be twisting the truth or misrepresenting facts in a way that is designed to divide, to make fearful, to polarize debate, rather than trying to find solutions that are bringing us together. And that's something you need to be worried about. On the third question around global government, yeah, that's something that we've seen also floating around in certain corners of the internet. I assume it refers to some of the commitments and some of the leadership that Canada has shown internationally around migration issues. As I said earlier, Canada is one of those countries that has done a better job on immigration than just about any other country. And Canadians, for the most part, are extremely positively inclined towards immigration because we know it has been a tremendous benefit economically to our country over the past years and decades and even generations. So the idea that we're somehow giving up sovereignty is yet again another thing designed to create fear and division, and I would encourage all Canadians as citizens to be thoughtful and skeptical about what they are reading on the internet and what they actually hear from politicians whenever they engage in public discourse. Thank you very much. You in the peach shirt right in front. Yes. Go ahead. Sorry, go right there. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Welcome to Regina, Mr. Prime Minister. I would like to bring attention to comments you had made back in November when you had spoke about the gender and social impacts construction workers create in rural areas. Although not a construction worker, I myself am an oil field worker in addition to being a full-time university student and have spent my summers temporarily relocating to various rural areas in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba to work on oil field related projects. During my time working in the oil field as a young female, I have come across some of the kindest and most respectful male co-workers and have created lasting friendships in the rural towns I had temporarily relocated to. I work very hard and have dedicated a lot of time in the oil field industry during my summer in order to keep up with increasing tuition costs. And I feel that you have painted myself, my co-workers, and friends in a negative light with your comment. My question for you, Mr. Prime Minister, is what exactly did you mean by gender impacts when you bring construction workers into a rural area? If you could, please provide a thorough explanation on your comment in addition to clarifying what exactly those social and gender impacts are. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your question, and thank you for your hard work. Construction workers build this country every single day. The work you do and the work your colleagues do around this country, building our roads, building our bridges, building our homes, building our factories, building our country every day is an essential building block of the country and the future we're building. That's why we're investing historic amounts in infrastructure. That is why we know that investments in the work that construction workers do right across the country is essential for building the better future that we need. Thank you for your question. Next question. You, ma'am. Go ahead. Yes, your question right there.
I don't have a question for you.
Oh, sorry.
Because I don't think that there's anything you can say at this point. I believe that the Wet'suwet'en have title to their land. I believe that they've gone to Delgamuukw to demonstrate their inherent rights and title. I believe that the conflict that you're making it into out west with helicopters flying overhead and paramilitaries showing up with assault rifles is appalling. And so I'm more or less here to tell you that that's shameful. And you can't pretend that this is about rule of law.
Sorry,
Oh, I'm fine with
please
being
be
interrupted by, supporters. That's great. But it's that it's not about the rule of law because it's already been found in Delgamuukw. It's already been pretty clear. You say you're about communities and supporting their development and their investments, but how much money does it take for Indigenous communities to take these colonial governments to court every time just to prove what they already know, which is the Canadian government, the provincial governments have no right to be doing what they're doing. Perhaps 2 generations of your sons will be apologizing later for what's happening today. I just want you to consider that, and that I don't believe that you're this sort of sunny ways Prime Minister when you legislate the posties back to work. When you're out there violating Indigenous people's rights, you can put on a great facade here. I've heard more than enough people say, answer the question, and you're talking in circles. The discerning of the viewers already are aware of this. Solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing that perspective, and it's an extremely important one. Are you going to stick around for my response, or? Okay, thank you. Over the past generations and indeed centuries, Canada has failed in respecting the spirit and intent of the original treaties, of the relationship that we were supposed to have with the original inhabitants of this land. It was supposed to be about partnership. It was supposed to be about shared stewardship. It was supposed to be about how we move forward together. And generation after generation of Canadian leadership did not live up to that. And that's why, over the past 3 years, we have made it a priority to repair that broken relationship, or to begin the work of repairing that relationship in respect, in partnership, and on 2 levels. First of all, on the level of the Crown Indigenous relationship, which means empowering communities to be in control of their own destiny, their own land, to be able to weigh in, to be able to develop self-governing models. A couple of days ago in Ottawa, I had the opportunity to sit down with the self-governing nations in Canada, and we had an excellent conversation about the challenges they're facing, but also how successful they've been in getting out from under the colonial relic that is the Indian Act. We need to move beyond the Indian Act. We need to make sure that people have opportunities to control their own destiny and build their future. And that is what we are doing. Now, the other side of things is realizing that Indigenous peoples in this country still live in conditions that are far worse than non-Indigenous people, whether it's boil water advisories, whether it's substandard housing, whether it's schools and medical centers that are not able to give them the support they need. There are huge problems in terms of the quality of life and the services offered to Indigenous peoples in their communities. And that's why we are significantly investing in those. We are trying to improve in an immediate way the quality of life in Indigenous communities across the country. But as we all know, there is an awful lot of work to do. And some places are moving faster than others. Some communities have a head start over others because of work that they've done in the past. And the other issue is, no matter how well-meaning the solutions might be from Ottawa in trying to say, well, this is what you need. If they are solutions sourced from the federal government, they cannot be the solution. The solutions need to come from Indigenous communities and Indigenous leaders themselves. And that is why, in some cases, it takes time to work with them to develop that path and those solutions. Now, there are also challenges. One of the challenges we're seeing with the Wet'suwet'en is that there are elected chiefs who have said one thing in support of the pipelines, and there are hereditary chiefs who are in disagreement. And these are things that need to be worked out, and they need to be worked out in respect, in partnership, in consultation, because we're doing something new in Canada. When we say we need to change our relationship with Indigenous peoples to be more respectful and a better partnership, that's not something we've done before. It's not something people around the world have been particularly good at, so we don't even have great models for that. So we are developing it, and there's going to be turbulence along the way. And I was pleased to see a reducing of the tensions yesterday in Wet'suwet'en, but there is still much more work to do as we figure out how to get our resources to new markets, get our resources. Canada will always be a country for all our investments in AI and science and the knowledge economy. We're always going to be a country that relies on natural resources, on people being innovative and thoughtful and hardworking to get our natural resources out to new markets. And that is something that we're going to have to figure out how to do together in new ways. And there are folks who are... Did she leave? Oh. There are folks who are impatient. And I'm impatient too, because we want to make it happen for real. But it is going to take time, and it's part of a process. Thank you very much. One a question on pricing pollution. Okay, sir, go ahead. Here, hang on. We'll get the mic to you. Here, sir. Sorry. We have a question on carbon tax right now. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Jason LeBlanc. I'm from Estevan. I have to give you a little bit of a credit for one thing is you handle yourself well in these situations, but I think the reason for that is because you're used to it. People are turning on you, and you're starting to get really good at circling around on these answers here, and that's what I'm seeing tonight. My question is very broad. For a lot of you sitting in here right now, don't realize what's going on right out those doors. There's a huge protest, and there's lines up of semis and trucks and taxpayers' money, and it's enormous what's going on. And this is just one of the many protests that have been going on that CBC fails to report. And in the CBC that we see in Saskatchewan is not the same CBC that you see in the East, and the people need to realize that. Thank you. Now, part of my question is just for you personally, Mr. Trudeau. Have you seen, heard of the terms of continuous cropping, green space? There's so many more things that are happening in Saskatchewan. When's the last time that you saw diesel exhaust being emitted from a diesel truck? You don't see that anymore because we've been on that. When's the last time you've seen a train going down the track belching black smoke out? You don't see that anymore. And when's the last time you saw farm tractors that used to be everybody farmed 10 quarters of land and there was 10 tractors out there going? Now they're farming 100 quarters of land with 1 or 2 tractors, and they're all not emitting this diesel and this exhaust and these fumes that you talk about. When you get onto these questions that rile me up a little bit is because a gentleman spoke earlier, and that was his words, but he talked about globalism. China is probably emitting, I'm not sure of the numbers, but how much more carbon are they emitting? And you're charging us with a carbon tax, and yet you're promoting it globally when that is not how things are to work here. And you're taking money away from us in Canada. You talked about education. We had questions up here about education and how you're going to pay for it, yet you're cutting the very arm off that puts the equalization payments down to your part of the country. So
my question is, sorry, ma'am? You would like me to ask the question? You know what? I sat here and I watched your face most of the night, ma'am. And you are...
Okay, hang on. Let's not make it personal.
Okay,
Let's not make it personal.
I'll make
Sorry,
it personal.
let's be respectful.
My question is, why would you charge a carbon tax on something that is not even proven to be factual and taking money away out of our pockets for Canada? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, sir. Okay. The question is, why are we putting a price on pollution? Let's start with the fact that climate change is real, and it is a challenge. A few years ago, the floods in Saskatchewan cost $600 million to Saskatchewan's economy. Every year we're seeing increases in droughts, in floods, in wildfires in BC and Fort McMurray. We're seeing more extreme weather events, from twisters to hurricanes down on the southern coasts of the United States. We are seeing an increased cost with the increase of extreme weather events. That is the cost. That is what is happening because of climate change. We know it is going to get worse. And we are right now in a situation where we are perhaps the first generation that knows how to solve this problem, but also the last generation that is actually going to be able to do anything to solve this problem and save the ecosystems and the planet that we have. That is the issue we have. So, most of us agree, we need to fight climate change, and we need to do it in a way that is going to protect our lives. Sorry, sir, I listen to you. China has a carbon tax, okay? China has a carbon tax. Sorry. They're not doing it the way, so you think we should do things the way China does things? I know that's not what you're saying, sir. Sorry. What we need to do is look at a way that Canada can do what it needs to do to fight climate change and grow our economy and support regular people while we are making that change. That is the imperative we have. Now, at the very basic level, there is, as we've heard here, a disagreement on whether or not we have to act to fight climate change. I think we do. I know many Canadians think we do. There are some people, including the Conservative Party of Canada, that does not think we need to fight climate change. They have no plan to do that. They are not putting forward a plan to do that. That is something I think Canadians should be thoughtful about when we make a decision next fall about who we're going to vote for in the next election. But I am unequivocal, and it's a differentiation point if you like. I think we need to absolutely fight climate change, and I think we need to do it in a way that supports regular people through this change. That's why what we're moving forward with by putting a price on pollution, because very simply, and you're wondering how it works, we have carbon pollution in our atmosphere because it has been free for polluters to emit carbon pollution into our atmosphere for a long time. There is no cost associated with polluting the atmosphere. If you put a price on pollution, people then find it worth their while as large emitters, as polluters, to look for ways to reduce the price they have to pay for polluting the atmosphere. So by putting a price on pollution, we incentivize people to pollute less. It's basic economics. You want less of something, put a price on it. We want less pollution. We need less pollution, so we'll put a price on it. However, and I understand your concern on this. I understand people's concern about affordability. They're worried that this means higher costs for them. Well, I can tell you that in Saskatchewan, the price we are putting on pollution will leave the average family $200 better off in the first year. Over the course of the next years, until full implementation, it gets up to $1,300 better off for the average Saskatchewan family while we put a price on pollution. And if you live outside of Regina or Saskatoon, like in Estevan, you actually get a 10% top up to that because we recognize the extra costs borne by rural communities across this country. On top of that, farm diesel and farm gasoline is not subject to the price on pollution. We are working to make sure that as we move towards an economy and a world with less pollution, we support regular people through that change. That has been our focus from the very beginning. When we lowered taxes on the middle class, when we brought in the CCB, when we, in the Canada Child Benefit, when we increased the guaranteed income supplement for seniors, our focus is on when we increase bursaries for students, our focus is on making sure that Canadians can afford the cost of living. And that applies to the fact that in Saskatchewan, with our price on pollution, the average family will be $200 better off in the first year. That is our approach. And the choice that folks will have in the next election comes down to, do you want to be part of not just fighting climate change, but being part of creating the solutions and a stronger economy for the future? Or do you want to hide your head in the sand and pretend that there is no problem we have to deal with? I know unequivocally which path I'm choosing, and that is what the Liberal Party of Canada will be demonstrating in the ride up to the next election. Thank you. Over to this section now. You in the red shirt. Yes, red shirt. Yes.
My son has a question, it's not me.
Okay, give the microphone to your son then.
How did you become Prime Minister?
I've been in politics for about 10 years now, and I spent a lot of time, both in politics and before being in politics, traveling across the country, doing different jobs, meeting people, learning about their views on the country, and working very hard to try and be able to make a difference in my community. I got elected in Montreal and have worked very hard to assemble around me and listen to an extraordinary team of people from across the country, including Ralph Goodale. And when we put forward in 2015 a vision of this country that was based in thoughtful policies that will try and bring people together as opposed to putting wedges within people and trying to build a country that recognizes and reflects that the diversity of perspectives and opinions that we have from different regions and different backgrounds can actually be an incredible source of strength and solutions for us. When we put forward that platform in 2015, Canadians gave us their confidence, and that's why I get to serve as Prime Minister right now. Thank you. You, sir, in the green. Or you beside him. There you go.
I wanted to ask about the Accessible Canadians Act that was just passed, and I looked at that and realized that ASL and LSQ, and those are the languages of the deaf people in Canada, that was not recognized in that. Can you tell me why?
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. We just moved forward on accessibility legislation in Canada that for the first time is really setting out the parameters of a more accessible Canada. It is a bill that, as federal legislation does, applies to federal jurisdictions, but it is also meant to bring real transformation right across the country as provinces and municipalities and businesses change their approach and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to participate, to succeed, to contribute to their community and succeed in life. That is something that was very important to me. It was something that's obviously very important to our Minister of Canadians with Disabilities and Public Services, who's Carla Qualtrough, who was a Paralympian herself. And it's something that we're very proud of. But there is still a lot more work to do, sir. I don't know exactly about ASL and to what extent sign language should have been or could have been, or what recognizing it within this legislation would mean. But I will make sure that we follow up with you afterwards so I can understand if there's more that we need to do around this legislation. That is something we're absolutely open to, because we know that making sure that everyone has a full chance to contribute, to participate in our economy, in our political discourse, in building a better Canada is something of fundamental importance to all of us. Thank you for your question, sir. Question now from the elder. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, there's a question here, ma'am.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, my name is Noel Starblanket. I'm an elder here at the University of Regina, and I congratulate Dr. Vian Timmins and the Prime Minister of Canada for what he has done for Native Indigenous people over the last several years. Done more than any other Prime Minister in Canada, I should know. So I wanted to congratulate him for that. But at the same time, he's quite agreeable that more can be done, more should be done, and all that. And I'm prepared to ask him how much more he's prepared to do, because when he does these things, people criticize him, saying that he should do more for other people and less for Native people. And then we're finding out that he's done more for our people, Indigenous people, over the years than any other Prime Minister in Canada. So congratulations on that.
Thank you, sir. As you say, there is an awful lot more to do. We have made a significant start in fixing the relationship and investing in Indigenous communities and helping with move towards self-governance outside from under the Indian Act, but whether it's continuing to move forward on eliminating boil water advisories. We've eliminated 72 long-term drinking water advisories. There's still a number more we need to eliminate, but we are on track to get rid of them all on schedule within the 5 years we promised. We're moving forward on empowering and ensuring that Indigenous communities have control over their own kids, for example. The challenge around kids being removed into foster homes and losing their language, losing their culture because they're in non-Indigenous households is a continued challenge that we need to address as a country, and that's one of the things that we're going to be doing more on. There's much more to do, and I certainly am committed to doing more in the coming year and beyond, depending on the will of Canadians. But I certainly also hope that we are going to be able to demonstrate that any and all government in Canada will continue on the track we're on of empowering, investing in, and making a real partnership with Indigenous peoples, a fact of life of Canadians. Thank you very much. Thank you for not interrupting my answer to the elder. Thank you. Thank you. Question here. You, ma'am. That'll be... Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Prime Minister Trudeau, for this opportunity. And can I also say thank you for the patience, humility, transparency, and people and leadership skills you've shown during this town hall meetings. I think it is something that is laudable, and should be emulated. And for me, what I have is more of an appeal than a question. My name is Michelle, and I'm a graduate student of the Living Business School, and they're doing a great job. University of Regina is great, and my dean, who was right there, they're all great. Now, this is my appeal. As an international student, we were informed that we were entitled to have our family with us if we so desired under the family unification policy of Canada. And we came with that belief. Now, I do understand that the different countries have their time frame for this process. And for my country, it was supposed to be 0 to 2 months. Now, it's with a heavy heart, I inform you and the good people here that for the past 10 months, we've been waiting to get a response. And this Christmas was particularly difficult for my family, especially my 7-year-old kid. As a father, you would totally understand this. And if we're going to give our best as international students in a new place and everything, we need to be psychologically and emotionally prepared, right? And stable. Now, having said this, I do realize that the CIC is doing an amazing job because of the probably overwhelming nature of applications they get. But I think 10 months, despite series of mails that have been written, is just a tad too much. And I think just between the London UK office and the Nigerian office, there's some red tapeism or bureaucracy or something has slipped through the cracks, and there's just nobody who can help, who seems to help. Having said that, I think Canada is a great country, and the people are amazing. I think the only cold thing in Canada is the weather. The people have a large heart, they are warm, and it's a privilege to study here. So regardless of what you tell me as a response today, I just want that on record. Of course, my preference as a response would be, oh, can I have the details so that I could call them immediately tomorrow? That would be my preferred response. But even if you don't do that, let it be on record that this year is a great country, and thank you for opening your doors to us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your question, and I think I will make you happy by saying absolutely we will take the details and we will follow up on your case. Ralph Goodale, who's not the local MP but is local enough that his office will be able to follow up with you. We will come and find the information on that and see what we can do about accelerating the process. But you are right, there are challenges with backlogs. There are challenges that we are working to address by investing more in our capacity to process immigration requests. We know we have to do better. We also know that we are limited by the amount of people that we can bring in and give a path to settlement and success with. That is what we're always working. We're not just looking to bring people into Canada. We're looking to have them be successful as they come to Canada, and making sure that's done right does take time in the processes, but we will follow up on you to see what we can do on that. To your first point around these town halls and that they should be emulated, I agree. I think this is something that you should be asking all of you, your local MPs, to do more of, and I think certainly it's something that party leaders should do. I didn't start doing these as Prime Minister. I've been doing these since I ran for the party leadership. I was reminded of that last night in Kamloops, where that was one of my very first town hall sessions back in 2013 when I was running to be party leader. And I find that this exercise in democracy of hearing a broad range of views, of trying to respond to questions, doing a good job for some, doing a job that people can critique on others, is a really important part of what we're doing. And it is something that we as citizens should be able to hold our leaders to an expectation of. I would encourage all politicians to get out and meet with unvetted members of the public who get to ask the questions and express their concerns and see how their leaders respond, because this is one of the ways we are going to continue to be a diverse, resilient country that knows how to listen to each other and build a path that's better for us all. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's been a real pleasure. It's been an honor. Take care, Regina. Thank you.